when we do these quick reads on, the financial statements, it says for young producers, well, what do I consider young? Anything under 70 looks pretty good, all right? But one of the things is they're for all producers. And I actually got up and worked out this morning, and one of the things that I did, I've actually written a couple articles this morning. And I don't know, I was just getting ready for this talk, and I says, okay, I'm going to do a couple articles on quick reads on your financial statements. Now, I've got a series of slides. You've got your handouts there. But one of the things is, let's look at some of my key ratios, okay? And one of the things that I'm going to do is I'll refer back to these ratios. This is kind of a summary. But for young producers, can I tell you right out of the gate, one of the things that you need to do, and matter of fact, this is the time of the year to do it, check your credit score. Check your credit score. Matter of fact, for my lenders, whether it's Farm Credit, Bankers, or FSA, one of the things that they will incorporate in your ability to get credit, but also the cost of credit, will be your credit score. And one of the things is you not only do this annually, but if you have a spouse, make sure you do the credit score on the spouse as well. And one of the things that I will tell you, they will use the credit score to examine your credit, but also for employment. 42% of all employers last year looked at your credit score, but they're also using it to determine your risk in insurance. Matter of fact, one of the things that they have found is that the lower the credit score, the higher risk you are as far as insurance, the less reliable you will be as far as an employee. And think about this credit score. I'll just give you this numbers here. One of the things that you'll find on your credit score, she will go up to a high of 800, but the magic number is about 700. About 700. And one of the things about a 700 credit score, you are only a 5% chance of delinquency on your loan. Okay? That's a key number. Say you were up in the top percentile, up on an 800 credit score, a 1% chance. 1% chance of the possibility of being delinquent. But look at this one. When your score goes down around 650, that percentage moves up to 33%. 33%. And one of the things is that this score goes down to 600, 51% chance of a delinquency. So one of the things that'll happen when they read your credit score, often it'll be husband and wife or partners or different things like that. More lenders, particularly since the financial crisis, are going to the lowest credit score. Okay? They are extremely, extremely conservative. And so one of the things is some lenders will go to the average credit score, but right up front, everybody needs to know your score. I've got some young people who are at university or might be at the technical schools. Even while you're in the technical school, you are building your credit history. You need to know your score because you haven't a lot of net worth. You don't have a lot of years of experience. So what they can do is examine character through this credit score. I'll tell a little bit of a story. I had a young farmer rancher down in Oklahoma. He was in my leadership deal. And what happened was he was farming and ranching, but he wanted to be a state trooper. Did all the physical tests, all the mental tests, passed in flying colors. But what got him rejected from the Oklahoma State Police? It was his credit score. And you know what happened? 27% of you will find false information on your credit history. Okay? And so what happened was he had a relative with a very similar Social Security number with a very, very similar name. And what happened was he had a score down below 600. And so the state police basically rejected him. So quick reads on that. That is something that's important. By the way, Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota, typically you will have about 30 to 35 points higher on your credit score than the southern states. Some of the lowest states are, of course, Nevada because of Las Vegas, but Mississippi, Alabama, and see, I'm talking a little bit slower. What's happening is the court system is very, very lenient toward the consumer, so they have lower credit scores down there. Up here, you screw up, you pay the price. And I think that's the way it should be anyhow. But, one other thing that'll impact your credit score, if you've been in the hospital, doctors, and some of those later type of payments, sometimes that will come in and dock your score. And also, what about checking your credit score? Will it lower it? No. Matter of fact, one of the things is, if you go out though, and if you're thinking about buying that Case International or John Deere tractor, you have them check the credit score. If you have a number of inquiries, that will lower it. What will keep your credit score high? Pay your bills on time. Okay? That is something that's very critical. So again, on this podcast, or whether it's here live for a young producer, that is something that's very, very critical. Now, let me go over here and talk a little bit about quick reads on your balance sheet. One of the things about quick reads on your balance sheet, every one of us in this room in January and February need to do your balance sheet, okay? And one of the things is it's your assets minus your liability, which will give you net worth. I like to look at the thing called percent equity. One of the things that's real interesting on this, say you had a business that had assets of $1 million, okay, and it had liabilities of $600,000, all right, and that's very typical of a young farmer, young producer. That would be $400,000 in net worth. Now, you know what the first question your lender's going to ask you? Where did the net worth come from? Did you bump up land? Lynn was interviewing me here, talking about land values, where they're jumping up $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 an acre over a 2-3 year period. Did the net worth increase because you pushed a computer button or pushed a pencil, or did you make some money and did it accumulate over on the balance sheet? And so a term that your lender will really want to hear is earned net worth. What percent of your net worth came from earned net worth versus appreciated net worth, okay? The other thing that your lender will be looking for, if we have $400,000 in net worth and $1 million in assets, your percent equity is 40%. Matter of fact, this is very understandable, particularly for young producers. I went to Cornell University, got my master's and doctorate degree. My dad only had a 3rd grade education, my mom had a 9th grade education, and so when I would come back from Cornell University, Dad would say, put it down in my terms. Okay? And you know what I would say? Dad, you own 93% of the business, the lenders own 7%. And then, you know what his next question was? Is that good? Yeah. I go, yeah. Yeah, that's not bad, Dad, all right? But here's one of the things that I would just share with you. And this is going to shock you this morning in reading your balance sheet. Think about this. The average percent equity on the U.S. farm balance sheet with our 2.3 million farms is 90%. 90%. And you'd say, that's got to be wrong. But think about it. When I go down to over to Portland, then down to LAX, Los Angeles, and come back across over to Atlanta on Saturday night while you guys are sleeping, think about this. 1/3 of the farms and ranches in the United States of America are debt-free. 1/3. Now, let me bring some reality to this, all right? To the commercial agricultural producer. In other words, those 300,000 or 400,000 farms that are generating about 80% of the revenue and carry 60% of the debt, you know what your benchmark is? Your benchmark is 60% equity. Commercial producers carry much more debt, and pork producers carry much more debt. Dairy producers carry much more debt. Beef producers carry much less debt. Grain producers, much less debt. You know why? Because they don't turn their assets. In other words, as fast. All right? And so your industry, being the pork industry, tends to carry more debt and you can do it. But one of the things is you've got to be a fine-tuned manager. One of the things is, for many young producers, you're going to be in this 40% range. I've got a line that says this: when this equity percentage goes less than 50%, one of the things that you've got to be is a superior manager. All right? In other words, you've got to have a risk management program. You've got to have production management and all the protocols. And you've got to follow those protocols. You've got to be modest on family living cost, okay? And what am I talking about? Modest on family living cost? The average producer today, and this is another thing your lender's going to want, and for my young producers, can I tell you, more and more of my successful young producers are developing family living budgets. Oh yeah. Matter of fact, Susie Orman, Dave Ramsey, highly recommend it, okay? Matter of fact, my son and daughter-in-law were on the Susie Orman show yesterday. They taped it, and they'll be on here, okay? It has nothing to do with the budget, all right? But they're arguing with their dad, all right, on something. And so they took it to Susie Orman, and she said, "This is a great one." So guess what? I'm going to get bashed on the Susie Orman show, all right? There we go. But what's real interesting when you start looking at and examining, one of the things that your lenders, but also this is something couples have to work out, partners have to work out. How much are we going to take out of the business to live on, and how much are we going to plow back into the business and grow? I find a lot of struggles with that. Or sometimes the spouses work off the farm. Might be a nurse, might be a teacher, work part-time. Or, you know what I'm starting to see? More and more of the active partners are actually driving truck, doing different things. And that is a big, when you read your financial statement, that's important to know. What are my personal family living costs? Now, can I share with you? You know what the whole overall farming population, their average family living cost? It's real interesting. Take average family living cost for a family of 3.3. Okay, that either means one's coming in the chute or one's headed out. All right, there we go. Got to put a little humor in this. All right, average family living cost is $85,000. So, you know what's interesting? So, if your goal is to grow your business, start, nurture, and grow your business, well, average is 85. You might be 45 or 50. Okay? But you have to decide. You have to sit down and say how important it is for us to grow the business. I had a young man the other day from Missouri. He was down my Austin deal in Austin, Texas. And he basically said, well, everybody else is $85,000 and above. He says, I live off $40,000. And he says, our objective is to grow the business. Okay? And so, again, that is something that they're going to kind of look at. And, you know, I've got to share with you, 19% of our producers on farm record systems, one of our databases, you know what we found? 19% of the producers had family living costs, listen to this, above $200,000. Oh yeah, and that's without income tax. I had one of the farm management instructors up here said, oh, I'm sure that included income tax. No, that was before income tax. And you know what's real interesting? That's 19%. 85% of those were what? Grain producers. One of the things is, the grain industry is on a 10-year super cycle. It's been the best, think about this. If you're involved with the grain industry and you're under 40 years of age, you were 10 years of age when we had the last downturn in ag. If you're under 30 years of age, you never experienced a downturn. All we've seen is good times. Over on the grain side. Now on the hog side, we've seen some downturns. But one of the things is, the more you make, the more you spend. And so what's happening is, and there's an old saying, and this is something I want to give to my young producers. When you start looking at family living costs, you know what one of the biggest mistakes you can make in reading your financial statements is to live out of your farm checkbook. Okay? Matter of fact, one of the key things that I could tell every one of you is set up a separate personal budget for living, put money in it, and keep your farm expenses separate. The thing is, when you start commingling, and by the way, a number of producers commingle. Matter of fact, if you take the family living costs, it's actually about 25 to 30% higher because, it's the gator that we put in there and it's the fuel we fill up at the tank. We kind of commingle, all right? And so what happens is, if you keep them separate, you know what's truly going on in your business. And boy, that is one thing that your lender does not like to see. They like to see that separate budget on living and then separate budget when you come over on farm expenses. And when you're looking at true profitability of your farm business, how can you tell if you've got commingled expenses? Okay? And there's an old saying about family living costs. It's like pouring concrete. You ever pour concrete? Take a little bit of sand, put a little bit of concrete in with it, put some water in there, throw some stones in there, and boy, once that stuff sets up, it's difficult to change. Family living cost is just like concrete. Once she sets up, it's difficult to change. And can I tell you, one of the biggest dangers that will come to the ag industry sometime during the next 7 years is going to be all the people who have bumped up to $200,000 worth of family living, and then all of a sudden the cycle changes, and one of the things is they're going to have a lot of difficulty because what's happened is their concrete is set up and it's got a lot of rebar in it. Okay? And my dad always said one other thing. This is for young producers, okay? He says, always remember, he says, you take a cat and put them on cream, and then you put them back on skim milk, you know what will happen? The cat will end up leaving home. Okay? So again, there's a soundbite. There's a soundbite for a podcast. But this is one of the things that your lenders will look at. But as you develop your business plan, this is something that you have to wrestle with, How much are we going to grow? How much are we going to go? And one of the things is, when you're under 50% equity, one of the things it will require is that you be modest on family living costs. By the way, I'll give you the top family living cost. You know what it was? $1.2 million. Oh, yeah. And one of the things that we are starting to see on the landscape is what we call killer toys. When you have those good years, we have killer toys. And I know I'm speaking at the pork deal here today, but over on the grain side, you know what the new killer toy is? Helicopters. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can buy them for about $800,000, write them off on the taxes, $500,000, right? Depreciate them rapidly. How do you justify it to the IRS? Go out and check the livestock. Problem is, oftentimes the livestock's in a confinement system. Okay? So, one of the things is, the more you make, the more you spend. And so, again, these are quick reads. So, remember the 90, 60, 50. 90% is your average percent equity. 60% is what the commercial producers do. When you go under 50%, then boy, oh boy, oh boy. Somebody asked me in the Young Producer Conference that we had down in Raleigh-Durham this weekend, how can we better prepare for our lender? As a young producer, you better have this balance sheet, and you better know what your percent equity is, and then you better say, okay, this is how we've generated our net worth. Okay? Those are 3 things that you need to know about equity. Now, here comes the big one. Here comes the big one. The big one that I think is very important for the hog industry. Okay? But it's important for the dairy industry. It's important for the grain industry. Is a thing called working capital. Okay? Boy, that is one thing you better get educated on, is working capital. And everybody thinks that's cash. It's not. It is things that can be turned to cash without disrupting normal operation. Okay? It's your current assets. Alright? And your current assets could be all the way from inventory to accounts receivable, those contracts that you have outstanding, to prepaid expense, to actual cash. And then, of course, your current liabilities, your account payable, your lines of credit, and any accrued expenses. Now, just give you an example. Say we have a business with $200,000 in current assets, $100,000 in current liabilities. That's $100,000 of working capital. That's not all cash. Don't make that mistake. It's not all cash. It's things that can be turned to cash. All right? And say you have a business, I'll just throw this out for the top of my head, that generates revenue in $500,000. Your working capital to revenue is 20%. I can go right to your data. And by the way, you got the best farm records in the United States of America in the upper Midwest. Matter of fact, there's 2 places where we've had good farm records historically. Upper Midwest and the northeastern part of the United States. Yes, the northeastern part of the United States. And boy, your FinBin data and all that covers a number of states. We've looked at the top 20% of agriculture producers. And by the way, they aren't all big farms. They're all over. The top 20% typically will have a working capital to revenue 40% or plus. The bottom 20% will typically have about 11% or lower. Okay? And one of the things about working capital is this. It is your resilience. It's your parachute. Or it's your James Bond. What am I talking about, James Bond? You ever watch James Bond movie? Back when movies were real movies. All right? One of the things about James Bond, when he came into a room, he was always looking for what? You best believe it, an exit. In this room, we've got a number of exits. But one of the things is working capital is your what? Exit. Or it is your backup. All right? Just put down James Bond. All right? And you will remember this. And particularly for younger producers, this is something that your agricultural lender is really, really stressing. I know the lenders up in this neck of the woods. I actually will probably train quite a few of these folks at banking schools and everything. And this is the thing that's hot on their mind, is this working capital. But don't get fooled. On this working capital, it's not all cash. But the thing that they are going to ask is this. When can this inventory be sold? Okay? And when this inventory can be sold. For example, you might have a bunch of hogs out here. You might have some corn in the bins and soybean in the bins. One of the things is you aren't planning on to sell it till next summer, but all of a sudden a emergency cash need comes, you have to sell it. But boy, when you sell it, when you aren't supposed to sell it, you will take a what? A discount. You'll take a beat. You will take a discount. And so one of the things that you've got to think about reading your financial statement, this is why that balance sheet with a projected cash flow for that next year is very, very critical. We do it in the creamery. We do it on our dairy farms. Because what we're trying to look at and examine is what are our James Bonds. In other words, if we had to sell some assets, how could we meet the expenses? But you know what the other benefit of having strong liquidity is? In other words, if an opportunity comes along, neighbor is going to sell some assets, or we take some cash discounts on some feed and fertilizer. One of the things is, you got to remember, success in financial management is not doing one thing 1,000% better. It's doing 1,000 little things 1% better. And this is your little things that you can do 1% better that can put you ahead of the game. And so, again, you've got to look at cash conversion. Or those contracts and deferred contracts. Will the people you are in business with honor those? Boy, one of the things that I'm finding is, as the agriculture industry becomes more interconnected, farmer A goes down, he takes farmer B, C, and D down, or agribusiness A goes down, it takes B, C, D, and 25 others down. Okay? That interconnectedness. And don't get fooled on this one. Many will use prepaid as a strategy to minimize taxes. Okay? I don't mind the strategy to minimize taxes, but I heard it right in Rochester, Minnesota a few years ago. Producer comes up to me and you know what he says? Very, very few farms go broke paying taxes. And I had a businessman right in my barn on Sunday night as he's looking at negotiating the sale of his business. But in that barn, you know what he said? I wished over my 12 years or 14 years I've been in this business, I would have paid taxes. Because he says now, in the sale of this business, he says, the tax man's going to love me. Okay? Because basically he's depreciated everything out, and basically the assets are coming in, and he has a tax problem. And the whole thing is, his equity coming out is just barely going to cover his debts. Okay? And so what I am trying to tell you up front is this. These prepaid expenses, we will use them to what? Reduce taxes as a strategy. But first of all, when you write that prepaid check out for fertilizer or for feed or whatever it is, you are an unsecured creditor. So if that business goes down, guess what? You're going to be the last at the trough. Let's make it in hog terms here. All right? But you know what the other thing is? If you write the check out in December of 2012, oftentimes you don't plant the crop or put the prepaids to work until sometime next summer, and sometimes we will start. Sometimes it's 12 to 18 months before you get your cash back. Okay? And so, again, it can put you in a cash flow bind. Here's the other thing. Cash. How much cash do we keep around? Take your average of your expenses throughout the year and average them out, because sometimes you'll get a slug of expense. I'm recommending 1 to 2 months. And I know everybody will say, over in Sioux Falls the other day, they were saying, you're crazy, you're crazy, you're crazy. That's fine. I am crazy. All right? But if you read the book by Jim Collins called Great by Choice, in the book, he looked at businesses that earn 10 times as much as other businesses over their lifetime. You know what? One of the principles out of the book is they're extremely disciplined on cash. Okay? And why are corporate businesses going from traditionally 3% of their asset base in cash, now it's 6 or 7%? Well, you'd say it's all the uncertainty in Washington, D.C., which probably it is. But they realize and they know the power of cash. Okay? Because if you're a person that has a personality that's a little bit conservative and you want flexibility, you better have more cash. But you know the one personality that gets themselves into problems? It is the alpha dog personality. Okay? In other words, the aggressive. They're growing. And you know what they want to do? Hold back on the cash. And so then when the hiccup comes, they have no James Bond. They have no alternative out. And that's what will bring some of the aggressive producers down. And it's all back to cash management. Now, for all my young folks in the room, it has nothing to do with your farm financial side, but it has to do with your personal budget. And can I recommend this? One of the things on your personal budget, family living budget, say you've got family living costs. I'm going to be nice, conservative, young family. Say their family living costs are $60,000. And you'd say, boy, that's a lot of money. One thing I will recommend on your budgets is what? Put it on a monthly basis and add 25% to it. Because that's how it's going to target out. I see it happen all the time. And one of the things that I recommend is this. If you have $60,000, keep what? 4 to 6 months in a cash reserve. 4 to 6 months. Particularly a lot of you getting your startup businesses. Maybe the spouse works off the business and different things like that. 4 to 6 months. Now, Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman will recommend a higher amount. 6 to 9 months. Okay? But one of the things that I will tell you, the average American has 13 days. 13 days. Basically, your average American is living paycheck to paycheck. But your average American's better than the United States government. Well, no. Can I put it in perspective? And I'm not in here to slam the government, okay? But I am. All right? Can I take all the zeros off the $16.4 trillion worth of debt and just break it down and pretend our government's a household? Would you like to see that little example? If you don't, you aren't going to see it. All right? And I'm not being Republican or Democrat or either way. All of them. All right, let's just put it back to basics. Here's what's going on in your United States government. Brad, this is brand new from last week. See, it kind of update everything here for you. All right? Here's what's real interesting. Our government spends the equivalent of $38,000 a year. Household expenses, right? The problem is they only bring in $22,000. They currently are running a $16,000 deficit in the household. Okay? And guess what? For the past 9 years, how much credit card debt have they run up? In other words, deficits. They've run up basically $163,000. Now, what's the solution? Well, we raise the taxes on people over $400,000. Okay, you know how much that would equate to the deficit? Just on a household basis, $38. It's amazing. It's amazing. And so what I'm trying to tell you is, as young producers, when you say, where am I going with this story? Don't get hammered with a bunch of zeros. Put it down to basics. And basically, you can't, continue to spend 38, bring 22 in. Okay, and run 16, because eventually the bankers who are financing this, which I'll tell you in the keynote session, the lead bankers, China, you know what they're basically going to say? We're going to charge you higher interest rates, or we're going to cut you off. Okay? And you can't say it's a blame them. All right? So again, that 4 to 6 months, that cash reserve, is something that's extremely, extremely important. Now, I've hit all those. Let's kind of go over onto the income statement and kind of look at a couple of things. For my young farmers, first of all, never manage your business off tax records. Never manage your business off tax records. Take your beginning balance sheet, your ending balance sheet, and you do what they call accrual adjusted. In other words, adjust for your inventories, adjust for your receivables, payables, etc. You know what the difference in what you report to Uncle Sam and what you really do in your business? We've had 3 or 4 studies done over a 5-year period, 60% difference. Yet we're making what? 5-year, 10-year, 15, 20-year decisions with information that's 60% inaccurate. Lenders are making decisions off tax records. Some of them use tax records. It's dangerous. That is 60% difference. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, schedule an appointment with your agro lender and have them do an accrual adjusted. Okay? And by the way, the FinVin, FinPac information does that. All right? It has been doing that for a number of years. Now, what are some quick reads that you would like to look at your income statement? Boy, here's a big one right here. All right? How much does it take to generate George Washington? Okay, bringing it back to simplistic terms. All right? And you know what you do? You take your revenue in your business, and one of the things is you take and divide expenses minus depreciation and interest. You know why? We play games with depreciation, and a lot of farms don't have any debt, so they don't pay any interest. Got me? So, say we had a farm business generating $500,000 in revenue, and after we took out the interest and depreciation, the expenses were, well, I'm going to make this a super young producer. Say it was $300,000. It's costing you 60 cents to generate $1 worth of income. Listen to this. Last week, I had a producer just north of you, well, northwest of you in Canada. Oh, yeah. And boy, he's been in my deals. He's about 34 years of age. He's got the right commodities and the right crops up there. Last year he did it for 48 cents on a dollar. Oh yeah. And continuously he's been able to do it. He says, I've got a good system of production, risk management, and finance together. And he says, I'm dialed in. And I remember when this kid started. Okay? But you know what? One of the things that he did? He started with a business plan. Oh yeah. And he actually works, I got to be kind of careful because it goes all viral. But one of the things is he works with one of the leading banks in Canada. I'll just leave it at that. Now, here's one of the things that you've got to shoot for. Keep this ratio under 70 cents. Okay, that would be the proverbial green light. Okay? 70 to 85 would be the yellow. Boy, once you start getting up above 85%, there's no margin to pay debt. You either got to have a couple of things. You've got to live frugally, or you've got to have yourself a set of non-farm income. Okay? And boy, one thing that'll get a business into problems very quickly is robbing Peter to pay Paul. In other words, pulling out over here to hit over here or put this enterprise in business because we passionately love the business. That is why a thing, when you're reading your financial statements, called enterprise analysis is very, very critical. What's making us money in that business so that we can allocate our capital and our time toward it. Did you all hear that? Write that one down. Now, on the FinBin data, what we're finding, and this is 15, 20 years of information, consistently the top 20% do it for about 68, 69 cents. You know what the low 20% is? About 89 to 95%. And one of the things that I'll say in my keynote address, you will see in the next 7 years, the good producers will get better, the average will fall behind. Okay? So watch that one. Another one you've got to watch for is make sure that column called miscellaneous is never more than 5%. When it's more than 5%, I tell lenders it's a red flag because basically they don't know where their expenses are going. They're just in the same way with household expenses. You see miscellaneous 5, 7, 10%. You know what that is? It's basically the oil that's leaking out of your transmission. Okay? If I could give an analogy. And you don't even know it's happening until you put cardboard under your car or your truck. You ever done that? I would hope you would. All right. So, if you ever see that more than 5%, matter of fact, when students used to do business plans at Virginia Tech, and we actually had them do them on real businesses. If I saw that more than 5%, minus 10. Okay. I was a tough sucker. Oh yeah. No, I was. And it was just one of those things. It's a classic mistake. The other one, and may I paint this just a little bit. Your interest expense, and it's an easy one. You take your interest expense, in other words, all the interest you're paying all your creditors, and if it's above 15% of your revenue, with low interest rates the way they are today, I like to see that under 12%, to be candid with you. What we found was, and this is when interest rates were higher, once that gets up around 20, 25%, you know what's happening? The debt's cannibalizing the business. Okay? And so it's one of those things that and that's a simple one to do. Just take your interest cost and divide it in your revenue. And here's one thing. Don't go back from this educational session. Go back home this weekend and do it on 1 year. Make sure you do it over a 2, 3, 4, 5 year period. Okay? The trend analysis is very critical because 1 year may give you a misread. All right? But boy, if you start seeing this trending up, trending down, very, very critical. Couple of final things, and I'll open it up for question and answer because we got to keep the deal right on time. I talked about family living cost, commingling business and personal expenses. Here's the other thing too. I've got a number of young producers that are in business with their family, and heard this one this weekend. Yeah, we're only pulling about a $30,000 to $40,000 salary. I've got friends that are out there getting $70,000, $80,000 in salary. Folks, one of the things that will get family arguments with younger generation and older generation is only to look at cash salary. Don't forget about the perks that they get. Yeah, the perks. Might be the home. Might be the fuel. It might be the hog that dies accidentally on the income tax. Never happens, does it? All right? One of the things is make sure there is a value placed on those. Because one of the things that's going to be real critical to the hog industry, you'll hear me mention this, big thing that I'm seeing coming to the ag industry, back in the year 2000, it was all about low-cost labor. today it's about attracting high quality, high talented labor and retaining it in a rural area. One thing I want you to remember, I was up in Canada. I had a producer moving his operations out of Ontario over up into Manitoba. And I says, that's great. I says, can you attract the manager, high quality manager? You know his response, oh yeah, eh? Yeah. I says, can you attract that individual's spouse? And then all of a sudden he says, you know, I never thought about that. One of the things that you're finding is, and Peter Drucker, who was a management guru, University of California, Claremont, he said, whenever you hire an individual, you directly or indirectly hire their spouse. This is going to become a big problem in rural areas. Okay? As I go into western Minnesota and certain parts of South Dakota, you know what I'm seeing? Fewer yard lights. Yeah, fewer yard lights. And here is a trend that's going to hit your industry. You will see people live in town and commute out to the farms. Yeah, because of that whole type of issue. The other thing is, make sure you put a value on the perk so you're comparing apples to apples. Very, very critical when we start looking and examining that. And so again, valuation of those perks, very critical. The one final thing that I would give you here, again, I want to keep things on time, open up for some question and answer. Just be careful of credit card debt now. But you know what the thing that's replaced credit card debt? Student debt. Matter of fact, student debt's now over $1 trillion. You know what the big universities are having problems now? Attracting students. Students are saying, I wonder if I'm getting my value. And one of the things that I'm finding on credit card debt, it's averaging $10,000-$15,000 per family. But student debt, $22,000 undergraduate, over $100,000 plus professional school. And so one of the things that we're really finding is your lender will look at the number of credit cards you have, and ideally it should be about 3. Did y'all hear that? 3. And can I tell you how you can build your credit score? Keep it about 15% of the limit. Okay? And make sure you make your payments. That'll build your credit score. Don't get it up too close to the limit. That'll ding your credit score. Okay? But one of the things about the student debt, it's really accumulated out there. And one of the things is that for some of my younger people involved in the agriculture industry, it's basically setting back 5 to 10 years. Okay? That's why I really like community colleges and I like the vocational and technical schools. And as a university professor, not everybody needs a university degree. Okay? One of the things that you'll find in the next 5 to 10 years is lifelong learning, adult education, and getting the specific skill. There's nothing wrong with a broader type of education, but one of the things is you're going to start to see university programs kind of shift like that, and they're going to shift fairly fast. Okay? So, those are a lot of quick reads. All my other handouts, I've covered a whole lot of those. I want to make the last 5 minutes your part of the session, so I'm just going to sit down here and take some questions, drink my Delta Airline bottled water here that I bring. Okay? Who's got a question? If not, I'm going to sit here and stare at you for 5 minutes. Okay? Fire away. Yes, sir.
America rapidly going broke.
Yes. Well, the whole thing is, you know, I hate to tell you, you got a bunch of drama queens and kings. They've discovered TV, and they're playing it out. Fiscal cliff was nothing. This debt negotiation, debt limit is something. A couple of years ago, and it could impact each and every one of us in this room. A couple of years ago, the rating agencies downgraded the U.S. debt. And, you know, immediately I thought interest rates were going to go up. Matter of fact, I forewarned the farm credit guys I work with and the banks. I says, holy smoly, we're going to see an increase in interest rates. But you know what? We were lucky, as Clint Eastwood would say. Europe was going down faster than we were, and so what happened was our interest rates went down. This time, we may not be as lucky, and here's how it could impact the hog industry. All of a sudden, it starts playing tricks with our currency. And matter of fact, it'll devalue the dollar. And you'd say, well, that's great, but we can export more. Yeah, but then some of our inputs. And one of the things is it could create currency disruptions. This one is not an 800-pound gorilla. It's a 900-pound gorilla that is out of control. And, okay, you'd say, okay, hotshot, give us your recommendation. We already had it. It was bipartisan. Simpson, Bowles, Bowles, Simpson. Okay? Democrats and Republicans, they put a lot of good work in. The people that were on that whole task force, I'll call it a task force, pretty sharp guy, Mark Warren, Democrat from Virginia. The guy's sharp. Okay? Been a business person. And Erskine Bowles, you take Alan Simpson, Wyoming. They put it together and it basically said $3 of budget cuts for every dollar tax increase. And one of the things is we are going to have to start having a plan like this. You know why? Because we are not sending the correct behavioral patterns to our worldwide community. That we've got our act together. And the more and more we go away, I got to tell you, and you'll hear me in my keynote, 80% of economics is behavioral, psychological. And one of the things is we're sending the wrong messages. We blame Europe, but I'll give Europe kudos. At least they did something. All right? And so the bottom line is you can't continue to do that 38-22. It's on an unsustainable path. 3 ways out of this, okay? We could default on our debt. When you're a quarter of the world economy, that's not pretty. You know what the other thing that you can do? You can try to grow your economy, and that's basically what Dr. Bernanke has done. And matter of fact, I think Dr. Bernanke personally has made our politicians even more immature because the Fed will take care of us. The Fed will take care of us. It's kind of like, you know, the family's in trouble. Uncle Ben's going to take care of us. And so what he is trying to do is bridge that gap with all this quantitative easing to allow the politicians to get their act together. But you know what the third thing that he is definitely doing? He's printing money. We don't know it, but we can feel it. Basically, our dollar doesn't go as far. We are printing money. And that's your 3 ways. You look at countries that have been in massive debt problems, that's your basic 3 alternatives. I don't mean to be gloom and doom. I've got to be realist. Am I concerned? Yes. Are the people on the airplane with me concerned? When I hit Oregon with a bunch of cattle ranchers on Saturday, will they be concerned? Absolutely. As a matter of fact, the whole country is concerned.